Hello guys, welcome to yet another terms which we are going to discuss in our ethics keyword series, and the term is persuasion. This is another term which is directly mentioned in our syllabus and hence it makes it important. Again, as we have discussed previously, it's not only about definition and examples. We are going to have a 360-degree understanding of this particular terms so that when you write an answer based on this particular term, it acts as a score differentiator. That is our purpose in this particular series. Let's understand the term persuasion. Now, persuasion is a specific form of social influence, and you have not watched that particular video on social influence. Please go and refer to that particular video, so that will help you to maintain that organic flow in these terms, right? So it is a specific form of social influence in which one person deliberately uses what? He deliberately uses communication, ideas, or emotional appeal to change another person's attitude or behavior, right? This is very important. So he uses communication, he uses arguments, right, to change another person's behavior. Okay, now let's understand the definition of this particular term, persuasion. We will use this particular definition because it is succinct and precise. It says that persuasion is a fundamental aspect of social psychology that involves what? It involves influencing an individual's feelings, beliefs, and behaviors through communication. This is very important. And why it is a part of social psychology? Please go and refer to the previous videos. We have discussed why persuasion is part of social psychology. Now, let's understand what it means. Let's say that somebody is trying to convince you of something. It could be anything. Probably a new political party has come and is trying to ask you that you vote for that particular party, right? And you are in this particular state of denial. That is your point A, right? Your current attitude or behavior is that, okay, fine, the new political party has come, but I'm not very convinced with their argument that they're giving, right? But gradually when you listen to their argument, listen to their message, listen to their emotional appeals and reasoning, it affects your belief system, it affects your core probably value system. And then what happens is this: from the state of denial which you are present in, you go to point B with a new attitude or behavior. Probably you will going to vote that particular party, right? So this means what? In this particular case, it is through the tool of persuasion, they have changed your attitude and behavior, right? So this is very important, that it changes the attitude and behavior, and we're going to understand how it does so. Now we will understand how persuasion works, right? It has a bit elaborate steps and we'll understand each and every aspect. The first step in our influencing or persuading others is your message. Now this is the most important. Now a message is communicated using, it could be anything. It could be words, visuals, stories or appeals, probably an Instagram story, probably a vlog, probably a blog. It could be anything. But message is the most important because it tells a story, right? The second thing is, in this particular step where you are changing a particular person's attitude, is the cognitive process. The moment that the story goes across, right, it affects the cognitive process. Now, what do we mean by cognitive process? Every human being, as we have discussed previously, is nothing but summation of its beliefs, its faith, its value system, right? The moment the stories goes across to that particular person, then that particular person, the receiver, right, who has heard this story, is interpreting, making sense of that particular message, right? He has not converted himself. He's making sense of that message. Like, that's the reason why the message is very important, right? If he finds value in that particular message, if he finds coherence in that particular message, if he finds that there is similarity to his value system, then probably he will adopt that particular message. He will probably adopt. So here what he continuously, he is analyzing, he is comparing, he is criticizing, right? He goes through all process of evaluation, re-evaluation, reasoning, right? So this is the second step, cognitive process. When you have heard the story, when you have heard the message, then the cognitive process. Once this process is done, when the second step is done, then if that particular message is an appeal to your core value system, to your belief, right, then what happens? Your attitude changes. Your attitude changes. So it is increasingly acceptance of what the message is, what the particular messenger is giving, right? You agree to that particular messenger, right? So this is what happens. Your attitude changes, right? Your attitude changes. And we very well know once our attitude changes, what happens, the very next step is our behavior changes, because behavior is action, right? Best example would be if the message is about a voting pattern, like or vote, a new political party has come and is asking for your vote. Initially you are not convinced, but through continuous messaging, right, and you compare it, you reason it, what happens is that your value system changes, you be more accepting to that particular message, and then what happens, that your attitude towards that political party changes. And moment your attitude towards that political party changes, then what happens, you go and vote in favor of that particular new party, right? So this is a step from first, it is important, which is the most important, is message, to the behavioral change, and this is how your persuasion works. Okay guys, now let's understand some of the major theory and principle of persuasion, right? You are going to become an administrator, right? So you should know the nitty-gritties of how persuasion works. So when UPSC is asking question that you need to change somebody's attitude, the moment you quote these kind of examples, these kind of theories, it elevates your mark, it differentiates your marks, right? So according to Aristotle, what he says is this, that persuasion is the art of influencing an audience, whoever it is, art of influencing an audience through three pillars of rhetorical triangle. So this is the rhetorical triangle, right? So when a question comes on persuasion, you can just copy paste this triangle, and it's a very simple triangle where you just write logos, ethos and pathos. So what does Aristotle say? Aristotle says that you can influence an audience through three pillars, which is your ethos, that is your credibility, pathos, that is your emotion, and logic, that is your logos or logic, right? Let's understand each and every pillar. Okay, so the first pillar of Aristotle's rhetorical triangle is logos. Now, what does logos mean? Logos is nothing but reasoning, right? It is giving facts, it is giving comparisons, it is giving arguments, studies, statistics to influence the receiver, right? So let's say in case of a politician who is trying to convince you to vote for him, he will give you some stats that in last 5 years, these things have not been done by the state. If you bring me, I will be making sure that I give you 3,000 rupees, or I will make sure that our GDP grows at this particular rate. So he's giving you numbers, right? The second pillar is nothing but your pathos. Now, what does pathos means? Pathos means emotions, right? It is connecting his argument through emotions. He gives anecdotes, he gives stories, right? He makes an emotional appeal through some quotations, right? So that is along with your argument, reasoning, there is this emotional appeal that is reflected in your pathos according to Aristotle. And last but not least is your ethos, that is credibility. Who is giving that particular message, right? And hence we find that during the election campaign, we find star campaigners, right? This shows credibility of the news, credibility of the information that is being communicated, right? So according to Aristotle, these are the three pillars by which you can influence, you can persuade a particular person who is holding a different belief system or holding a different attitude to change into an attitude which is to your favor. Okay, let's understand the 6 principles. So the first principle is reciprocation. So what does it mean? It means that people feel obliged when they receive gift, and once they receive gift, favors, right, they reciprocate. That is called reciprocation. The best example would be, right, government giving free dustbins, right, color-coded dustbins, so that the people segregate their waste. So that is one of the best example of reciprocation, and through reciprocation, you are persuading people to change their attitude. The second example is commitment and consistency, right? Now, once people commit to something, they tend to act consistently. For example, so this is again another way of persuading people. Like the more you make people commit, right, they tend to follow through. The best example would be here, Indore resident pledged cleanliness, consistently retaining India's cleanest city, right? The third principle would be what? Your social proof, right? Social proof means what? That the more people observe what others are doing, right? They tend to follow that. So that is another way of persuading people. The best example would be Instagram, right? The more people are seeing the virality of news, the virality of a trend, right? Giving thumbs up to something which is viral, right? Tends to do what? Tends to persuade people to follow that. The best example would be in case of LIC shares, like so when the IPO came out of LIC, right? People saw that many people were subscribing, right? And then everybody went and started buying, purchasing, the LIC IPO, and it was oversubscribed, right? Another example would be your liking. Like, people are more likely to follow a particular personality whom they like or personally know. For example, in case of Virat Kohli, the moment he endorsed Manyavar, right, its sales shot up, right? That is again another way of persuading people to change their attitude, right? Then authority. Now this is again very important. And guys, these are some examples. You can use these examples. You can use these arguments to do what? You can use these arguments to make sure that your answers are elevated. You can use these arguments to make sure that how you can improve or you can bring innovative changes in your administration, right? Another example is authority. Humans tends to have a strong tendency to follow a strong authority, persuade by a strong authority. Best example would be our Prime Minister when he asks people to go and take a COVID shot, and we have seen photos circulating where he himself had taken a COVID shot, and that also inspired or motivated or persuaded people to go and get COVID shot. The last but not least is scarcity. So again, if the opportunities tends to be low where that particular commodity is in less amount, right, it persuades the people to change their attitude to quickly and go and access it. The best example would be, the Book My Show, that particular website crashed because millions tried to get access of Coldplay tickets, right? So because they know that it is only limited amount of tickets, so that persuaded people that they have to go and get the tickets as quickly as possible. So we have seen that there are 6 such principles how you change or how you persuade people to change their attitude: reciprocation, commitment and consistency, social proof, liking, authority and scarcity. Okay, now let's understand ethical versus unethical persuasion. And in this, we will understand persuasion versus manipulation. In case of persuasion, what is happening? The integrity of the message is important, right? So the message, whatever you are giving, right, has to be integral in nature, has to be honest in nature. But in case of manipulation, you are exploiting cognitive biases. You are exploiting cognitive biases of that particular receiver, right, without informed awareness. The best example will be what? I think some of you have faced this issue, that Indigo allegedly pre-selected travel insurance for unaware ticket buyers. Let's say that somebody who is buying tickets for the first time, they unknowingly tick, or it comes as pre-ticked or pre-chosen of travel insurance of rupees 299, right? And if a known buyer would obviously will not select that particular box, but unknown buyer does not know, right? It is already pre-selected and had to be, and they pay rupees 299 without their knowledge. So that is manipulation. That is not persuasion, right? That is not persuasion, because that particular person does not know. He's not making an informed choice. He's not making an informed choice. Second, you have to understand there's a difference between persuasion and propaganda. Now, in Nazi Germany, what was happening, Joseph Goebbels, the propaganda minister, he was using this particular instrument, this particular tool called propaganda to shape perception of the German people to the benefit of the propagandist, benefit of the Nazi regime, right? So what was the propaganda about? The propaganda obviously was about what? It was about Jews, right? That they were second-class citizens. They are the reasons why German society is falling apart, etc., etc. Which obviously, being propaganda, is not true, right? So again, we have to be very careful. Persuasion is not propaganda. Persuasion is not manipulation, right? So Joseph Goebbels, so this is a personality, right? He used rhetoric. He used such propaganda machines to do what? To brainwash the majority of the German people, right? Now let's understand ethical duty in governance, right? So ethical persuasion is what? ethical persuasion must remain transparent. Now, this is very important. It is not your propaganda. It is not your manipulation. It must remain transparent, voluntary, and aligned with public interest, right? Now, this is very important. It must remain what? It must remain transparent, voluntary, and aligned with public interest. Now, the best example would be the government's Give It Up LPG subsidy campaign, right? So, this is government appeal to the well-off citizenry that, you know, you give up the LPG subsidy because you don't need LPG subsidy, because there are other people, other section of the citizenry who need this particular subsidy, right? So it was a very clean campaign. It was a very honest campaign that you don't need it, give it up. And we have seen many affluent society people have, or affluent people from the society have given up this this LPG subsidy. So again, this is what? This is your ethical persuasion, right? You're communicating truthfully, right? You're communicating truthfully. It is transparent, it is voluntary, and most important, it is aligned with public interest. Let's see some of the other examples. One other examples, I guess, you have seen both in Delhi and Mumbai. What happens is that the police, the traffic police, so they persuade people to obey traffic rules by posing some memes, right? One of the famous memes, we have seen that in Mumbai, people who are riding without helmet, right? They were being given sweets and flowers, right? So again, those pictures were posted in social media, right? This is an ethical way of doing what? Persuading people to change their what? Change their attitude towards obeying traffic rules, right? This is again a very transparent way of bringing change, right? Persuading people. Let's see another example. Now, this is again a very important example. Selfie with daughters, Sunil Jaglan. He is another pioneer of this particular initiative. You can quote his name also, right? So again, here it is persuading towards shifting the patriarchal gender norms. Let's see another example with regards to public health, and we have seen during COVID in Kerala, this break the chain movement, where we have seen again very transparent way of persuading people that, you know, you break the chain of COVID being transmitted from one person to the another, right? Then Darwaza Band campaign, very important, very crucial campaign with regards to cleanliness, where we have seen Amitabh Bachchan successfully persuaded people to use toilets, right, in rural India, right? Then another example will be your RBI's Kehta Hai campaign. Again, a persuasion technique. To do what? To educate citizens against banking frauds. And we see here personality, right? We see here personality who brings credibility to this particular message, right? As we have said, credibility, right? The credibility does what? Credibility makes the message more reliable, right? It makes the message more reliable, right? The ethos part of it. Remember, in Aristotelian concept, logos, pathos, and ethos, the ethos part of it is your credibility, right? So let's see some of the model questions. Persuasion is an essential tool of democratic governance, but it can easily slip into manipulation. Discuss the ethical dimensions of persuasion in public administration with suitable examples. So we have given such 5 examples, right? And how do we talk about Joseph Goebbels? We talk about Indigo, how they're manipulating customers. Joseph Goebbels, how he was a propagandist minister, right? So we start with that, and then we give such example with regards to financial security, sanitation, public health, gender equality, traffic safety, how the government is persuading people, right, to change their attitude. And we have seen some examples also. By that, we can easily write this particular answer, right? Right. Discuss ethical dimensions of persuasion in public administration with suitable examples. Right. Okay.